You are listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW with our guests Michael Burke, Cristina Paccione, Zayas, and the Soul Stories aggregation. And it's Live from the Heartland with Tom Clark, Katie Hogan, and Michael James. The revolution might not be televised, but will definitely be on the radio.
NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on the court from 29th District.
That's the revolution will not be televised, and we have been watching Channel 5, the NBC, and as it says in the song, and you are getting ready to listen to 1 hour of good conversation, a lot of information. You're going to have a good time listening to Live from the Heartland. We're here today with a number of interesting guests. We've got Michael Burke and Cristina Paccione Zayas from the Erickson Institute and the
co-producers of the Soul Stories Live, Victoria Reeves and Johnny Price, will round out the show.
Okay, so on your mark, get set, go.
Our self-impeachment process continued this week. POTUS intimidating witnesses in real time with his Twitter feed.
Incredible.
Maybe shows how much he's scared of his blatant self-interest suddenly coming out in the public. I don't know. I am increasingly fearful that this is a very dangerous, caged bully, and I'm really concerned about the next few months.
If I hear Bill Maher say one more time he won't be elected, but he won't leave, I'm just going to go through the ceiling. He's creating it by saying it over and over.
Well, the nature of the GOP defense tells me that we really are continuing to be a seriously split country.
Yeah.
The powers that be have succeeded in instilling fear and division. They've done a great job at that, and I don't think there's a single mind that got changed in the opening week of hearings.
Well, there's an awful lot of good information that implicates the president, but who knows how many people are listening or paying attention.
I really liked that Roger Stone was convicted this week.
Hallelujah.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer bloke.
He's got a tattoo on his back of Nixon.
Well, it sort of proves the point about...
I don't know why you know that, Michael.
Because I saw it on the news, Kate. That's why.
Well, then it must be true. I mean, foul news is going delirious. They just can't figure out what's up or down. They're using some of the same arguments that they used to push Benghazi and stuff like that are now blowing back on them.
You know, on closer to home here, well, it's all close to home these days, our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, has returned from Springfield. She has some new relationships, apparently, but as of yet, no deal on the Chicago casino and the amount of taxes that go here and there. And we're rooting for her. I think it'll take a little time to sort this out, but it's in the process.
Part of the Springfield story was that John Cullerton, longtime head of the Senate, retired. What do you think of that, Katie?
I think he's done a great service, quite frankly, and I know that a couple people here were questioning that, and I know some people will never, ever be okay with anybody who's been in Springfield for a long time because we've got some problems, i.e. pensions, hanging over us, caused by some of those bodies over the last 3 decades or more. But I'm sorry, I know John Cullerton. I went to college with him, sat in the same room while the lottery numbers were drawn, very emotional night, and he's a good guy. And I wish him many happy years of retirement with his fine wife. So there.
And just a note in passing, because we've covered it a lot, the first consent decree report came out about reforms in the Chicago Police Department. They only accomplished 16 of the 67 goals they were supposed to accomplish so far.
Well, it's not a surprise, but I still maintain that consent decree work is the most significant thing that has happened to allay our most serious problems with brutality and unfairness and straight-ahead racism in the police department, and I think it's also going to have a lot to do with the new superintendent pick. In other news that we didn't hear maybe, if we were paying too much attention to impeachment hearings, Canadian crude oil is once again moving through the Keystone Pipeline nearly 2 weeks after it leaked a football field worth of oil, estimated 383,000 1,000 gallons of oil in North Dakota. Remember Standing Rock, people. Remember water protectors. This is what it was about, and it has come to be.
Oh, but the company said they cleaned it all up. They got about 2/3 of those 100,000 gallons cleaned up out of the wetlands.
Yeah, well,
Nice, great.
Would you
I
like to have
can't-
seen that?
I can't cuss on the air.
Hey, 200 jobs for a week.
Other news that outraged me was the coup that happened in Bolivia this past week or so. The president, Evo Morales, has escaped to Mexico, and a right-wing woman has taken over and is saying incredibly racist things about the Indians in Bolivia, of which the former president was a member. There were people killed on the streets of La Paz last night. It is hell on wheels down there.
Travelers
Sorry to say.
to Europe, and particularly to Italy, better be aware that Venice is sinking ever more and is deep in the water as we speak. And so if you're going there, bring your fins and your goggles. Hopefully that, well, they're facing the same issues we are here in Lake Michigan and around the world.
And in fact, those high waves are causing increasing concern for Rogers Park residents who've not only lost beaches and park walkways, but now back porches.
That was incredible. Those waves going up 2 stories.
And onto the roof. I mean, you could see ice on top of the roof from waves.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting summer as the city and Army Corps of Engineer, through an arrangement the Alderwoman set up, are going to be doing some emergency work on the lakefront. Unfortunately, it's going to mean probably no access at Juneway, Howard, et cetera, until at
It's
least
okay. We
spring.
got room for them at Loyola Beach.
I think we do, although it's a lot smaller than it was.
Yes, it is. It is a skinnier beach by far.
And it changes virtually every day.
It does indeed.
It's a pretty amazing set of developments over there.
So now for our calendar. Oh, no, wait.
Well, before the calendar,
Right.
a lot of people's attention was drawn to Rodney Reed on death row in Texas, due to be electrocuted, and or however they're doing it down in Texas. There was a campaign to bring up new evidence. I listened to a real detailed show on the RAG radio yesterday on KOOP out of Austin, and apparently she was about to be married to she's white, and she was about to marry a cop, also a white guy, and apparently she was having an affair with Rodney Reed. She ended up dead. Rodney Reed went to jail. But the cop also went to jail later for another rape and spent 10 years, and it was revealed through his attempt to get cover through the Aryan Brotherhood, he revealed that he had killed his fiancée. So the courts in Texas have postponed that execution, and there's a good shot that new evidence will be introduced, and hopefully there will be justice. There's a lot of people on death row around the country who probably need a little more support and steps toward real justice.
You're so right about that. Today, as we have announced before, today at 11 from 11 to 4 at Potawatomi Park is Independent Living Day. Lots of information, help, and resources about folks with disabilities making their way through life independently.
Also today, Apples to Applesauce, preparing for climate change, an 11 to 2 o'clock canning demonstration.
That's so cool.
By Resilient RP. There'll be some lunch and conversation about how we prepare each other as neighbors for the coming changes because of global warming. That's at the P.O. Box Collective.
Also today, it's the last day to participate in participatory budgeting, voting. That's the habit we've developed in the 49th Ward over the last, 8 to 10 years, I think, started by Joe Moore, and picked up by our current Alderman, Maria Haddon, who actually worked for participatory budgeting nationwide before she became alderman. So check out the possibilities online. You can vote online, or you go over to CMSA, the Math and Science Academy on Clark Street, and place your ballot then.
Okay, and tonight, close to home in Rogers Park at the New Rhythm Arts, 1441 Morse, 7 p.m. There's an interesting program going on called Bodies, Books, and Buildings, the Aging Salon.
I think we should go, Michael, because, we're aging.
Well, I was talking about going to see that movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman, but I could do that another day and maybe go check out this program, Bodies, Books, and Buildings, tonight, 1441 Morse Avenue.
On November 18th, a bunch of colleagues of Joe Siegel are having a benefit to help with some of his healthcare costs at the Jazz Showcase. Please look it up online. It's a wonderful lineup of guests.
And on Tuesday, our Network 49 is putting together another helpful night for our neighbors. It's called A Fair Tax for Illinois with budget expert Ralph Mertieri at Living Water Community Church. That's at Pratt and Ashland, 7 p.m. It will be not only some explanation about the fair tax legislation we'll be voting on next November, but also some ideas about how to be active around getting other people aware of the importance of their vote there.
There's another Democratic Party debate this week. The Bernie Sanders folks are gathering to the Teal Room on Wednesday, the 20th, from 8 to 10, to take a look at that debate.
Also vying for your time that night are Climate Realities, the Indivisible Salon on the Green New Deal. It's being done at Sulcer Library, 4455 North Lincoln, 6 p.m. for that.
And Tom is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with bears and how it relates to our future.
One of my favorite sections of the newspaper, yes, I'm archaic that way, is the Science Times and the Tuesday New York Times. And there was a wonderful story about how we might learn from bears who hibernate every winter in a way that would help humans preserve organ donors for longer. And I just think it's an interesting story to look up. And we're going to keep you abreast of all the developments as we learn to hibernate. It's our farm report for the week.
All right, you are
Farm those
listening to WLUW 88.7 FM and WLUW.org. Please like us on Facebook.
On the road must have a code that you can live by, and so
a little bit of teach your children to head off our next segment on early childhood education. Have two wonderful colleagues, Michael Burke of the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, and his colleague here with the Erickson Institute in Chicago, Cristina Paccione Zayas. Thank you both for coming here. I've really been wanting to just have a conversation with Michael, an old buddy and a former board member of mine, on all sorts of topics for a long time, but I realized talking about your work the last decade and beyond would be a really interesting morning conversation. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having us.
You get to spend money on kids.
Yes.
Your working days,
Yes.
And you've been doing it for over a decade now. Can you talk about these early childhood centers that you've been helping to build?
Yep. So one of the great privileges I have in life is working for a foundation called the Buffett Early Childhood Fund. And one of the things that we are investing in, as you mentioned, is this nationwide network, coast-to-coast network called EduCare. And this combines early education and childcare, well-evaluated, high-impact schools. And by this time next year, we'll have 25 EduCare schools in 15 states, plus the District of Columbia, plus the Winnebago Nation. And the whole point of this is not to build an EduCare on every street corner, but to collectively have an impact on public policies, federally and in states, so we can lift the level of quality for all kids and families, no matter what kind of early childhood setting they're in.
Does that mean that you've been lobbying said leaders as part of your job?
No, I do not lobby, but we do fund public policy advocacy. We fund the First 5 Years Fund, which is based on Capitol Hill, and they work with Congress and the White House. And we also fund the Alliance for Early Success, which works with advocates in states.
Could either of you just give us a little bit about why it's so important for kids to get early childhood education and not to let them stay at home or wherever until they're 5 or 6?
Sure, I would love to weigh in on that. I think the science is really clear. Over the past 20 years, we've learned that 90% of the brain is developed in the first 5 years of life. So early experiences really matter, and the way that we, excuse me, the way that we support that is we have to be deliberate. And so high quality early care and education can really make a world of a difference in terms of life outcomes.
Cristina Paccione Zayas, thanks for chiming in there. But we've known this for a long time, right? So what has taken so long? And thank you for sticking at it to convince people of this. But is the Erickson Institute seeing ground gained on this issue?
I mean, I would say that there is a lot more public awareness. In fact, you see that in this current presidential campaign, almost every single candidate has a position on early care and education.
That's right.
So that's a difference. There have been more states coming online that are putting their state dollars towards high quality preschool, but it's not enough. We really need, there was a report that came out a couple years ago called Transforming the Financing of Early Care and Education. And what it really was able to do was give us an actual bottom line number to fund.
Who put that study up?
This was a report that was built on the Institute of Medicine's report, Transforming the Workforce. And there was a special committee, the National Sciences Academy, that appointed individuals to do this study and kind of cost model. And so what we understand now is that we need $140 billion with a B dollars to fully to fully fund early care and education, and right now we're like right under 30 billion. So we've got a lot of work to do, but you have to think about, we're nowhere near what we spend on K-12, yet we know the science bears out that the first 5 years of life make the world of a difference, and we have the evidence to show that when you do have this type of intervention, it does yield outcomes.
And if you look at the comparisons to what we're spending on prisons or even on defense, and right now we're living at a time, part of the momentum that is built is we now have admirals and generals and colonels and police chiefs and prosecutors who all recognize the importance of investing in the first 5 years of life because they can't find recruits for the military that are qualified.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So let's peel back the onion a little bit. Erickson has been around even longer than the Buffett Early Childhood Fund. You were really kind of pioneers in this field when Irving Harris and others were kind of going, why aren't we doing more pre-K? It was kind of the start, right?
Well, we actually were born out of the civil rights movement. So the historic legislation that put Head Start in place in 1965 really was about three visionaries along with the amazing Irving Harris coming together to say, look, now that we have a federal revenue stream coming through, how do we prepare a workforce to support the needs of young children? And so that's where the idea of Erickson Institute came together in terms of Irving Harris providing, obviously, the resources. Barbara Bowman, I don't know if you all are familiar with Barbara. 92 years.
Page would want to go woo at this point.
92 years young this year. She just had a birthday and is still showing up every day to Erickson and giving girls the news. She came together with Lorraine Walsh and Maria Pierce, and they all have kind of their different areas of expertise, whether it be psychology or social work, and Barbara with advocacy and early care and education. And they established the Institute with Irving Harris. And so that's really sort of our origin story, but we also extend out and do direct service. We provide infant early childhood mental health services for children 0 to 5. We also partner with the Department of Children and Family Services to ensure that all children in child welfare have developmental screenings and access to high quality early care and education. And then we also have a whole arm focused on policy and leadership, and that's where I step in with our Early Childhood Leadership Academy, our community data lab, as well as supporting our experts at Erickson to be able to translate their expertise into policy knowledge.
On that last point, has the industry, has the field recovered from the Rana years yet?
Well, those were rough, to say the least.
To put it mildly.
I'd have to say we're still recovering. When you had over 700 days without a budget, and you had basically our safety net unraveled before you, we had a lot of community-based organizations, social service agencies that either had to reduce workforce and capacity or just have to close down altogether. And so one of the, clear areas where you can see the biggest impact is with the Child Care Assistance Program. During the Rauner era, there was an emergency rule put in place that basically restricted eligibility by 90%. So 90% of the families that were currently on the roll were no longer eligible. That reduced the number of children accessing this valuable resource by 30,000. And so for the past few years, we have not been able to get up to those numbers. But I just actually saw some recent data that over the past 6 to 12 months, we've been able to actually regain. So we are gaining some traction, but you just see that there has been some major collateral damage.
Explaining the waft of stagnation blowing through our lives. What's the typical family or household that you attract to your centers? And I guess that's for both of you.
Well, for the EduCare centers, these are families that are eligible for Head Start. So they are, quote unquote, low income. And each of the EduCare schools tries to make a concerted effort to reach the most at risk, the hardest to reach. And so there's a number of factors that they look at, whether you're a teen mom, first-time pregnancy. They'll look at involved in the child welfare system. They'll look at a number of those factors.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. We're talking with a couple of folks about early childhood education. Michael Burke with the Buffett Early Childhood Fund and Cristina Paccione Zayas with the Erickson Institute. One of the programs Erickson has been shepherding recently is an online training for families, particularly focused on infant and toddlers. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
So we have actually a variety of infant early childhood supports. We have everything from our Fussy Baby Network, which is for families who essentially have a infant under the age of 1 that is fussy.
Come on, you're stigmatizing that poor kid.
Well, the child, is either struggling with eating, with sleeping, or just uncomfortable. And so our objective is really to support the parents in being able to meet the needs of the child and ideally strengthen their relationship, their bond, their ability to connect with their child and be attuned to their needs. We have a warm line that families can call. We also provide
That's cool.
a social support network so they can have circles to be able to kind of learn and socialize with each other. We also perform home visits. We have also a professional development training series for those that actually provide the services for infants and toddlers. Everything from, disattachment theory to, dysregulation and how you can support. And so there's a variety of ways that we've been able to really leverage this work in addition to thinking about there's a fan model, and this is a model that we use for our home visitors to kind of self-regulate themselves. Before they go into a home, they kind of get into a particular mindset and they really get set up so that they can be attuned to the family and be able to provide them with the resources needed and not kind of get caught up in the emotional noise of what's happening.
You know what? I'm going to step back a little bit. Michael, at the opening, you mentioned the Winnebago Nation.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could, that piqued my interest, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what you're all doing with that, how that came to be.
Absolutely. So this is, the Winnebago Nation is about 80 or 90 miles northeast of Omaha. So a little bit east of Sioux City. And they're a nation, a tribe that has done some very innovative and interesting pieces of work in terms of economic development. And it was their tribal council that realized that, typically in America what we find is kids growing up in low-income settings are starting school 1 or 2 years behind their more affluent peers. And in the Native American communities, those numbers are even worse. Those numbers are even more staggering. So it was really the tribal leaders who said, we see these educators coming up in Omaha and in Lincoln, Nebraska, and elsewhere on the south side of Chicago and elsewhere. Could we do one of these in a Native American community?
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So what have we been doing right, and how could we do better?
Well, one thing that's going right, Christine and I talked a little bit before the show, because I said we're going on with our 3 favorite rabble
And we're going to
rousers
grill
here.
you.
Yeah, so we got to be prepared. And, one of the things that struck me is it's sort of like the best of times and the worst of times. The good news is there is strong bipartisan support for doing better on early care and education. We see that in the polling, and we see it even in bills introduced. There was double the number of bills introduced, bipartisan bills introduced into Congress this year than last year on early childhood education. It's part of the reason why it's been elevated to a presidential campaign issue. Knock wood, there is no credible dispute about the science of early childhood. So we're in this period where there's a lot that we can build on and a lot of momentum that we can grow from. But at the same time, we're living in a country that is putting children in cages. We are expecting to do life-changing work with a workforce that itself is paid poverty wages. So we've got so much work still to do.
Yeah.
You anticipated my next question, which is, if this work is so important, if we know the science, why do daycare workers and teachers' aides, why do we let them be paid so poorly?
Yeah, I think
And expect the kind of outcomes the science
Yeah.
demonstrates can be had.
I think there's at least 3 reasons for that. One has to do with discrimination against women, and it's a predominantly female workforce. The second has to do with just how our country really treats teachers overall. And the third has been, the momentum that we have seen has been this shift from, okay, that's just babysitting, to, okay, no, it's childcare and there's some quality. There is some professionalization that's required, but there still is that sense of, well, these are little kids and they can grow out of it. But
Right.
I don't know, Christina, if
Yeah,
you...
no, and I would add another dimension. Not only is the workforce predominantly women, but it's women of color.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, inherently there's an issue around social justice. And in the same way that we do advocacy, we've been having this dialogue here in Illinois. So we say that, early care and education, access to it is, a human right, is a social justice issue, but we can't leave out the workforce in that, because it just doesn't make sense that, 50% are eligible for SNAP benefits, and in some cases TANF benefits, and they themselves can't afford high quality early care and education for their own children. So we really have to see this as a parallel issue, that we're not only advancing advocacy for young children and families, but also the workforce that are supposed to be supporting these efforts.
So tell us about what it's called social emotional learning, SEL. It's became all the rage with educators recently. Can you explain that concept?
Absolutely. I mean, it's everything, in the business community, they like to call it soft skills. Your ability to build relationships, do teamwork, self-regulate, impulse control, take turns when you are having conversations. And so these are all the skills that are absolutely necessary, and in some ways a greater predictor of long-term success and outcomes than the cognitive. And so it's really about, how do we have an early care and education system that lifts up opportunities for young children to develop these skills, and to then those skills to be the sort of building blocks for the cognitive development to be successful in the academic realm.
Mike, when you're looking at a particular market to do an educare center, what are some of the elements that go into that? I mean, you're not necessarily just focused on Head Start type households. You're dealing with a whole raft of stuff. Even as Erickson is trying to improve the whole teaching profession, what are you seeing out there as you build buildings with the soft skill part?
Yeah.
And how are they sustained after you're your bricks and mortar funding is gone.
Yeah, our great philanthropic strategy has been to wait for the telephone to ring, because each one of these Educare schools is really a public-private partnership. And the first Educare was built on the south side of Chicago here in partnership with Irving Harris, who Cristina mentioned before, and is sort of the godfather of early childhood philanthropy. The Ounce of Prevention Fund, which is, obviously a
Wonderful group.
high, powerful, powerhouse early childhood organization, and the Chicago Public Schools. And so we look for those sorts of partners in each of the communities to come together and show some interest in trying to do better, because it's really a new way of doing business. And each of the Educare schools takes social emotional learning extraordinarily seriously. And in fact, one of the new frontiers of the work, one of the things that's really most exciting, I think, when you look out into the 21st century, is we know a lot about what's happening in classrooms. We know how to hire good teachers. We know how to provide additional professional development for them. We know how to coach teachers in early care and education settings. We have tools to assess the level of quality of not just the space, but the interactions. And we know how to do continuous improvement. But the other part of that equation is family relationships and what's called family engagement in the early care and education world. And there's a woman named Portia Kennel, who's the birth mother of Educare and the birth mother of the Educare network. And now in this sort of third chapter of her career, she's looking at how do you unlock the black box of family engagement. Because we know from research at the University of Chicago that Ariel Khalil has done that parent-child relationship accounts for about a third of the achievement gap. But we don't have we don't know how to assess parent engagement. We don't know how to train for it. We don't know how to coach around it. And so she's leading a work involving parents themselves and involving other Educare leaders across the country to come up with an approach, almost a curriculum, a coaching model for how do you do this work most effectively. And all of that is wrapped around social emotional learning. And I think that'll be one of the big breakthroughs that we'll see in this century.
There's been a lot of discussion with the city budget talk about how the new mayor, did not get mental health centers refunded. Erickson's doing a lot of work in this area. Can you talk a little bit about the center that just opened in Little Village?
Absolutely. We're so excited because that's been in the making for the past few years. So we have a Center for Children and Families. Our flagship location is at Erickson's main campus in River North, but we were able to secure some funding to be able to open up a full-service clinic in Little Village. And so it provides the same mental health interventions and behavioral health interventions in Little Village, but in the context of being culturally and linguistically responsive. So all of our clinicians are bilingual, bicultural, are able to really provide these interventions in the context of the community. Because as Mike was saying, we have to think about children are not just widgets. They are developing in the context of relationships between themselves and their parent or their primary caregiver, which is in a broader context of a neighborhood and a community, and then, of course, our city, state, and nation. And so you have to bring that lens to the work, and in particular, Little Village being predominantly Mexican immigrant, and given our political climate right now with immigration, there is a lot of trauma that families are experiencing. And so that's the type of kind of lens that we're bringing to this work to be able to mitigate the adverse impact of trauma on the architecture of the brain and the child's ability to build relationships.
Wow. I'd like you to consider, both of you right now, to picture the dream result of 2020 politically that could bring about the kind of change.
Cristina is president.
Back from the dead.
Okay, so I want you to get a little more real, but I want to thank you, Michael Burke, and Cristina Paccione Zayas, for coming on today and talking to us about this most important of priorities, and hopefully it'll become something that replaces and moves other things down the list of priorities that we've been expending more money on. Thank you for your good work, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
You are listening to Live from the Heartland, 88.7 FM. Join us, friend us on Facebook.
And go to youtube.com/Heartland Media for hundreds and hundreds of great interviews.
Hey, don't tell me now. You more of what you're fucking for. Hey, don't tell me now.
All right, One Nation Under a Groove, Funkadelic. We didn't quite get that line in, but that's the song, people. We are One Nation Under a Groove. Don't you forget it.
Groove.
All right, we now are joined by Victoria Reeves and Johnny Price, co-producers of Soul Stories Live. Welcome to Live from the Heartland.
Whoa.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's fun to see you both.
You both usually get up this early?
6 a.m.
Six.
That's my time.
She usually gets up at 6.
So
you
you're
know.
getting older.
Yeah.
Well, but he's a
Up early.
DJ.
That's what it
he DJ'd
is.
all night last night.
Yeah, I DJ'd all night. I can't believe I'm still up though.
Well, you're young.
Yeah.
That disappears with age. I
Something to look
assure
forward
you.
to.
Looking
All
forward
right.
to it.
You are both storytellers.
Well, primarily, I am the main storyteller in the family, and Johnny is the DJ, but he's a burgeoning storyteller.
Yes.
Tomorrow
Okay.
is his debut, actually.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. Yes, I'm excited.
Oh, we're
So
both
then
into
I'll
it.
start by saying, Victoria, how did you become a storyteller?
Hi. Okay. So I went to my first Filet of Solo show at Lifeline Theater 2 years ago, and I've been a writer forever. I have about 50 journals to prove it. I'm a writing coach, but I saw my first solo performance there, maybe about 20 of them actually in that 3-week time, and I was like, "This is it. This is my jam. I want to do it. This is my life." So I took a class, and that's how it began. And now I'm performing all over the city. I have a solo show coming up, and we produce our show now. So this is it.
So your show being Soul Stories,
Yes.
how did that come about?
Well, Johnny, you want to take that one?
Oh, well, basically when we were in Evanston and we decided we wanted to do something for the city and bring a voice to the city, in the area where we lived. I mean, it's very multicultural, and so we want to give people much more of a chance to be heard and give much more voice to people who are regular folks so they can learn about the human condition, so to speak. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, are you familiar with our friends Michael McCarty and Sue O'Halloran?
Sue O'Halloran is in my water aerobics class at the Y.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
I know her
went to high
deeply.
school with her.
Oh,
Wow.
oh, wow. Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Babes.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
And we just covered the movie that was made about Michael McCarty, our
Okay.
friend who is a storyteller. And that was a wonderful movie. Anyway,
Yeah.
enough about that.
Sue's good people.
Yeah. Tell us about Family Dinner, stories of comedy and tragedy.
Okay,
which
so
is tomorrow.
Super exciting. Tomorrow we're running our show called Soul of Evanston for the last 5 months. Tomorrow is our debut as a new name, Soul Stories Live, in a new venue, Firehouse Grill, which is at 750 Chicago Avenue. The theme for tomorrow is family dinners, comedy, and tragedy. I don't know about you guys, but like my family growing up was sort of like a Woody Allen film, but
Oh, so totally.
not as fun.
My family,
there's a lot of
my
material
family's
there.
like growing up, watching the movie Good Times. So,
All right.
Exactly. So we're like, well, it's a few days before Thanksgiving. Let's mix it up and do family dinner stories. So we have 6 tellers tomorrow, very, very diverse group of tellers, both economically, racially, educationally, etc., which is our mission of our show, to provide a platform for everybody. And yeah, so that's what the stories are about. It's going to be super fun. And we start out with a soul music brunch DJ'd by yours truly,
right here.
Johnny, from 1 to 2, and then the show's from 2 to 4.
Yeah.
And we should point out to our listeners, tomorrow's show is actually sold out.
Yes, it
so
is.
plug your December show.
Let's
that's
talk
coming
about
up.
December.
Let's talk
We've
about
all
that.
got flyers right here. So Sunday, December 22nd, also Soul Music Brunch at 1. The stories start at 2, and the theme is expectations.
Yes.
So that is intentionally open. We may have, New Year's expectations, holiday expectations, family expectations, or your own expectations about your
Such
own
a heavy
reality.
weight.
Yeah, but it could be fun.
Pretty much, but it could be pretty fun. We have a lot
Achieved
of
expectations.
Yes.
Who's telling a story first?
Oh, today?
Yeah.
You choose.
Okay, we can make one up.
No, I'm saying you choose.
Choose
Who do you want to go first?
Who you want?
Oh,
Yeah.
Who you want to go first?
you go first.
Junkin. Okay.
Okay.
So I have a solo show, as I mentioned, called Brassy and Intrepid, which is going to be part of the Lifeline Theater Filet of Solo Festival coming up in January. So this is the opening story for my solo show, which, by the way, Johnny DJs music in between these sets. The name of the story is The Feminist Collective. Naked from the waist down, Jane, Lisa, and I lay on the floor of the Feminist Collective. We are ready to explore an unknown land. All of our tools for our journey lay on the floor next to us. Plastic speculums that we got from the Women's Health Center, flashlights, and mirrors. We lock the doors, close the blinds, and prepare to see our cervixes. I have to insert that speculum and open it until it clicks, Simone. Doesn't that hurt? Probably less than a baby pushing its way out of your dilated cervix, Jane moans. We know all the lingo. Our dog-eared copies of our bodies ourselves have been our mandatory required self-reading for the last few weeks. Because you see, Jane, Lisa, and I are on a mission to become feminists before we graduate from Beloit College. So we figure we better. It's going to happen. So we figure we have to start by learning about our vaginas. Speculum in, mirror down between my legs, flashlight on. I crane my neck to see. It's just dark and red. I feel weird. Pull my pants down, go in the kitchen, make some tea. It's the early 80s, the era of second wave feminism and the sexual revolution. Women are mapping out new roles, taking back the night and deconstructing everything we've been taught. We are goddesses, Amazons. I have very few roles for my personal revolution. My mom married young, had 2 kids. She seems happy with this life, but I want more. Jane and Lisa join me in the kitchen now. Hey, so my trip to Minneapolis for that modern dance workshop was so cool, I say. Right? And how was that modern dance teacher, Linda? Jane asks, raising her Fight the Power cup to her lips. Okay, so she lives alone in the back of a factory in a really small room, and she has to share a toilet with factories. Like, Linda is so cool, the woman who taught our workshop. And then she choreographs these dances that she only can perform outside in fields because she has no money for a studio to perform in. I want to be Linda. That is so radical. I bet she's a pagan witch, too, Lisa says, stirring her tofu. Of course, I say. I mean, really. The Feminist Collective at Beloit College, that light gray 1920s Queen Anne with the wraparound porch was where it all began. My unraveling, the shaving of my head, the beginning of my mohawk, my intense need to play the Smiths really loudly, drinking vodka and orange juice alone in my room, and basically questioning everything I've been taught for the first 18 years.
Oh, right.
Pretty nice.
And it begins.
I was thinking about someone who might have just tuned in, So I can't help myself. But when you're talking about cervixes,
Well, we have to get some backstory, yeah.
etc. I was wondering about that. There's something in that story left out, and that's about whether or not when you go into the kitchen, everybody's still pantsless.
Right.
And I like the way you left that to our imagination.
Intentionally
Pulling up her pants and going
abstract.
in
Yeah,
the
she did
kitchen.
pull up her pants. One of them has. It was an interesting time.
Up or down?
So this is one of the family stories that you were having? At,
No, I think
This is Brassy and Intrepid.
you tell stories for all ages.
No, these are adult stories for grown folks. 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. This is not children's story hour.
Right, definitely
There are
not.
cervixes.
Yes.
So don't bring the kids to
Please
the
don't
firehouse.
bring the kids.
Don't bring the kids
Do
to
not
the
bring the
firehouse.
kids.
There
Please
clearly has been a resurgence in storytelling. It used to be kind of a unique thing to go to a storytelling festival.
Yes.
But now, just about every weekend, you can find some venue where there's some kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
Every
I
night,
do not
actually.
often hear about a storytelling festival with a DJ. So that seems to be one new element
But what
you're
a
bringing to
good
the...
addition.
True
Yeah.
that.
Why
Yeah.
did no one think of this before?
I don't think anyone has time. I mean, us DJs are very busy people. We spend most of the time sleeping during the day. So because we're usually working at night, but because I enjoy this I would say this project, that I would be willing to wake up and check it out, you know.
Well,
So,
but also I'd just
I mean,
like to add another level to that our show is all about creating a platform for community.
Yeah.
And so we feel like music is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
And like Johnny grew up at
well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
So
and
did I.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I grew up in the Gresham area, right by
Mount Greenwood.
St. Leo High School and 79th and Halsted. And
I grew up in Flossmoor.
Flossmoor.
And so when we first met, we were like, man, I was listening to WGCI and going to like Markham Roller Rink and roller skating,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in his neighborhood and I was in mine. So the point is, we knew all the same songs.
Yes, of course.
And
Yeah.
that was a kind of a point of connection from
Yeah.
day one, that we were like, wow.
Exactly.
We're not that different after all.
Exactly. I mean, I'm going to tell the story at the show tomorrow, at the actual show tomorrow. So I would like to just do my blurb, and it's only just a couple of sentences,
You want to do it now?
because I don't want to give it all away. So I'm just going to just do like a couple of sentences.
So what's coming up is what we would technically call a blurb by Johnny Price. Hit it, Johnny.
All right. Okay. It's 1973, and the double-wide charcoal brick two-story bungalow house at 8135 South Carpenter. On Thanksgiving night, we hear the sounds of James Brown, Eddie Kendricks, the Spinners, the staple singers, followed by a face slap, shouts, a shattered wine glass, a shot from a .38 caliber pistol, followed by a light but shrill, "Get the hell out of my house now, you broke Negroes!" And we didn't even have dinner yet.
Well, that's quite a
Thanksgiving
tease.
story.
That's quite a tease.
Yeah, that is quite a Thanksgiving. Wow, Johnny Price, I think you have a future in this field.
Okay, Johnny Price, where do you DJ besides doing the story stuff? Where?
Well,
Where
I
else?
DJ at, well, today I'm going to be DJing over at LG's, which is at 1537 Wells Street in Old Town. And also, I'm going to be DJing at the Pony Inn, which is on Belmont and Ashland later on this evening, too. So I'm pretty much all over the city. I'm at LG's, the Pony Inn, also Corcoran's, the Beaumont, and also like the place last night, the Happy Camper,
Camper, yeah.
in Old Town.
I remember when I was young and used to run around like
Yeah, we used to run around a lot, but they had jukeboxes. What's happened to the jukebox?
Jukeboxes are a thing in the past. Yeah.
I mean, my kid's in this band Twin Peaks of some renown these days, and he'll DJ at places.
Sure. I mean, the DJ culture has totally evolved. You know, it's
Sean
changed a lot.
Dervis.
Sean Dervis, house
Yeah, he
music
used to work
DJ.
at the Heartland. I know he does a lot of DJing.
Yeah, he's a house music DJ. Yeah.
Let's give a shout out
Big
to
ups.
the Electric Jungle up there on
Yes,
Greenleaf, because
yes.
there's a lot of people spinning records in there and buying records over there.
Right. Big ups to
DJs
Sean
galore.
Dervis and big ups to all the DJs, and also I'm also at the Darling as well on Randolph and Peoria with big ups to my man DJ Jesse De La Pena, who's part of the Louder Than the Bomb crew. You know, and
Ooh, Louder Than the Bomb.
Yeah,
Space.
yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
you
at
had that.
Space.
Yeah, Space.
Yeah, and also I'm gonna be at the E-Town Get Down coming up November 27th. So check that out in Evanston at Space, since
Yep.
you mentioned Space.
Yep.
So it's gonna be a real stone groove. So I hope everybody step on through there.
So in this digital age where we can get any content we want on YouTube any hour of the day, why do people show up for live storytelling?
Beautiful.
Good
So
question.
here's the phrase that I just crafted in the hot tub the other day, which is where I do my
At
best
the Y?
thinking. Yeah, at the
At the
Y.
Y.
Come find me.
McGaw-Y.
Yeah, McGaw-Y.
McGaw-Y.
No,
I've been
in that
everybody
hot
be
tub.
over there now. Come see me. Come see
A
me.
lot of
Come on.
thoughts.
I made all my friends over there. It's great. But real talk, I think that storytelling is like an experiential. Oh, honey, what did I say? It was so brilliant.
Oh, you said
Experiential sweat lodge.
Sweat lodge.
Experiential sweat lodge. And this is why I say this, because it really is. It's like you, first of all, as a writer and a performer, you know, you go into some pretty dark spaces sometimes, as evidenced, okay? But you do, right? And you're playing around with your subconscious and crafting your memories and all these different things into a cohesive form that hopefully somebody else could care about on stage, right? So there's that piece of it. But then when we come to hear storytelling, like when I'm the host of the show, I'm always like, hey, you know, turn off your phones, etc. It seems obvious, right? But to disconnect for 1 or 2 hours and literally jump into the mind and the spirit and the reality of another person that's on stage, it's such a magical experience. And that's why it's the experiential sweat lodge, because you come in, you purge, and you come out bigger, stronger, more powerful to kind of face whatever is happening next.
And dripping wet.
And dripping wet with excitement. That's a lot to promise for $15. But hopefully that's what people are going to feel.
Well, I look at it also as like going into an airport as well. You know, when you're emerging out of an airport and you have this newness about yourself. You know, you're experiencing people who travel to different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and then you emerge into your new destination with the
Looking for a cab.
Yeah, well, of course, looking for a cab, but you have this euphoria about yourself too, especially when you're in that new destination. So you're like, okay, what am I going to get myself into? And you just learn something about some new people. And then you also find out about the human condition, that there are some similarities as well as some differences, but those of which you can relate to.
Yeah, the similarity makes it kind of a family affair, right?
Yeah.
It makes it a family affair, but one very important point I'd like to say is we are not the same. We have many differences, right? And so, you know, how many years ago we'd say, oh, we're all the same. I don't see difference. That's not reality. We are different. But at the same time, we are human and we have this human experience.
That's right.
So creating that experience and that environment and that space for those connections to happen, that's why we do what we do.
Will you, Victoria, tell us about Filet of Solo when? Because is that coming up?
Yes.
So tell us when.
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
Great.
Because we're running out of time.
Got it.
So.
Okay, so Filet of Solo starts officially January, 8th, with our kickoff party, which is going to be at 626 The Teal Room, which is the corner of Morse and Glenwood. And the show runs from that date, the 7th, until I think about the 27th. It's a very long show. You can check it out on Lifeline Theater, TRE.com. They have the whole schedule is up now, and tickets are available soon. My show is called Brassy and Intrepid, as I did an excerpt from it. Basically, it's a gypsy road show of tales by a fearless feminist, which is me. And it's a solo show. It's pretty fun. My show is Friday the 17th, 8:30 p.m., and Sunday the 26th at 4.
If people want to participate in a future Soul Stories Live, how do they get a hold of you? How do you pick storytellers, etc.?
Great question.
Oh, yeah.
Hashtag
Soul Stories Live. Right. You get a chance to vet we vet you by having you send your story on to us, to an email. Also, you send your bio, as well as a portion of your story, and so that we can check it out and see, maybe hammer out some of the kinks and such.
We've been listening to Victoria Reeves and Johnny Price with Soul Stories Live. We want to thank our other guests, Michael Burke and Cristina Paccione Zayas, for appearing this morning, and as well as the crew that puts this whole show together.
Next week, we've got Tom Tresser, Clint Taylor, Lori Shelley.
No, that's the week after.
Okay, Mark Cleveland. Never mind. I love when we make mistakes right on the air like that.
It's human.
We're just going to say...
I want to thank Lynn Orman Weiss for helping us with our music production, and James Porter, who's behind the boards, and Ruha Koo, who does our videography work. Stay tuned for Bob Maravich doing Gospel Memories, and then later, our engineer James Porter with the Hoodoo Party. Do good in the world. The world needs all the good we do. All power to the people.